All right, good morning, everybody. Just starting session 2 here. Just a quick recap. I got the frame built. I got the head done first. I got the frame built. I got the skids on. So next step here in the manual is to install the servos. I figure what I'll probably do is I'll go through one of them, how I'm going to set it up, and and then I'll do the other two off camera. Cut this open. Dump in our tray. It's down here. And that down there. And so, and I'm going to put my servo parts right over here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rubber blocks. But because the kit comes with the graphite, these graphite top pieces that go on here, like this. I'm not going to use these brass collars in here. I'll just put them in like that. So we got that in there. And so when you put these blocks in, obviously you want to make sure the one, it's kind of like U-shaped, and you want to put it in there like so. Okay, so we get all of those in. And then we've got our servo arm here. Yeah, okay. So you've got three different linkage balls here. And so these two that are a little bit longer are going to go on your front servos for your left and right side. And then your elevator one is similar, same ball, but has a shorter base to it. And they are going to be self-tapping threads going right into the aluminum. And then you've got your third type over here. You got your little nut to screw in on the other side. This is going to be for your tail servo. So you got three different servo ball types. And so just again, your elevator has a shorter base on it than your two aileron, I guess. We are doing the elevator servo right now because it is the back servo. So we're going to take the shorter of the two. And then as the manual suggests, we're going to do the outer hole. So we'll grab our 1.5 millimeter wrench here. I believe it is. Nope, it's not. It's the 2. I'll put that back. So we'll grab the 2. So we're not going to be doing a lot of screws, so I'm not going to, pour a little cup of Loctite. We're just going to be doing a couple. But I am going to Loctite these. There we go. Now that is a threaded aluminum arm. So I mean, that just threads in there real good. Real easy. And again, we're doing the elevator servo, so you can see it's got the shorter base, whereas the two other servos have a taller base on it. And then the rudder servo is different. It's got a thinner shaft on it, and then you put a bolt on the back side. So but for this one, we're going to set it up like this. Now, again, because of the fact that these servos are easily accessible, I'm not going to put the heads on right now. And the reason why I'm not is because when I plug the servos into the FBL and I put the sticks in the center position, they're going to go to 0, for the FBL. And then I can just put these on here and get them right to 90 degrees, you know, or super close to 90 degrees. Being that they're so accessible, easily accessible, you know what I mean? I'm not, why do it twice? So that's that. The screw for them is here. I am going to put the screw in just so that it doesn't get lost. I'm just not going to Loctite it at this point. Just going to put it in so it's here. All right, so we've got our servos in place. Now these are going into plastic, right? So this is an example of where you don't want to use Loctite. Going into plastic here, so we'll put these like so. This should be a 1.5. I hope that's a 2. 1.5 is over here. Yes, it is a 1.5. So I'm just going to put that. There we go. I can feel the tension on them. And that feels good there. So if we take a look at the servo from this angle, you can see that we're just starting to compress the rubber pieces. And that's what you want to pay attention to. You just want to make sure that you're getting some tension on these screws. They're not Loctited because they're going into plastic. These rubber pieces are going to, you know, give it some resistance. So that's perfect. So they're all set up there, and you can see the rubber pieces perfectly in place here, ready for the carbon fiber plates to go on top of them for that one. And I'm just going to take a quick look back at the manual. Okay, yeah. So we're doing this one right here. We are doing the elevator servo at the moment. I'll come back and get these other two. We've got one carbon fiber plate in, so I'll put the other one in. Got these screws here that are pretty long. For 1.5s anyways, they're pretty long. That's my 2. So 1.5. Now, I picked up these MIP wrenches, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, and I really like them. And I have to say, they've really held up well. There we go. There we go. I use them quite a bit. If I'm not working on my own helicopters, I'm working on other people's. Here's a 470 here I'm doing some work on right now. So, well, let's get back. I keep getting distracted this morning. Okay, so we're starting to compress the rubber there. I would be very mindful when you're putting these screws in. So I've got my finger on the back side, and I can feel that it's starting to compress the carbon fiber plate onto the rubber. It's going into a plastic fixture. I would be very, very mindful not to over tighten that. And then we'll just take a little look. So this is our elevator. Now remember, from the first build video, I did not Loctite this. And I've just found in the past, being able to take this on and off helps as you get towards the end of the building process. And that looks like it will line up perfectly, you know, with that. So I'm going to pull the next 2 servos out of the package, but I'll do the exact same thing with them. So I'm not going to make you sit here and watch the whole thing. I'll come back when that's done. All right, so I'm just putting this servo in, and I just wanted to come back for a quick minute and show you how I have this situated. You can help yourself out and make this easier. I've got the rubber pieces in, I got the carbon fiber plate on the outside, and I've got the screws pushed all the way through. Now, as you can see, they kind of hold themselves in place. It's nice. And once you get all those things in place like that, then take your Loctite and Loctite these screws like this after having pushed them through. And like I said, I'm not going to be doing a lot of screws, so I'm just going to pull it out of the cap. So there we go. Got our screws all Loctited. And now these screws pretty much hold themselves as we come over and get this into position. I've heard this referred to as a fool's errand, but it's really not that bad on a 550 size helicopter. So that's how I'm going to put it in position to screw these in, and it's all set to go. All right, so let's talk about these 2 pages of the assembly here, pages 11 and 12. That's what I've gotten done. So what you do on those 2 pages is install the servos. And again, I have opted to leave the horns off for now. I'll wait until I've got the flight controller plugged in and it's in the neutral position, and I'll just drop them on. And I did that because they're so easy to get to. This one looks like it's tricky, but it's really not, because you just push the horn head on and then you reach a screwdriver in next to the motor and tighten the screw up. So this being that easy to get to, I left them off until I've got the flight controller plugged in. I really like the way these wires turned out. And what I did, because I didn't want the wires to pile up, hopefully you guys can see this, I zip tied 2 of them through the zip tie tracks. What I did was I put the heads of the zip ties on the inside. I zip tied 2 of the wires into the zip tie tracks. And then I took the 3rd wire and zip tied it to one of the 2 wires, so they're not piled up as they run through the helicopter. So they're not catching on anything. It's all clean and down inside. And that's almost everything that is on page 11. One tool that came in handy is this 1.5 millimeter Allen key. Not something that I usually use building helicopters. Came in really handy because you get a little bit of an angle on these screws. So this little 1.5 came in really handy. That is in... where's my Allen key kit? That comes out of this kit here. So, but all you really need is the 1.5. It's got a ball end on the end of it, which is cool because you can put the Allen key in on an angle. So that was nice to have and worked good for that step. The other thing was the servo arm for the rudder is plastic. I don't love it. I mean, I'll probably replace it, but so we'll just take a look at that real quick. It cut the 3 sides off with a pair of wire cutters, and then took this 4-way wrench here and just held that in place. And what I did was I just stuck a little Loctite on there, and then just drove it on through with the 1.5, and then just snugged it up on the backside. I'll tell you, even though it's plastic, it will probably hold up pretty good. I'm really surprised that they gave us aluminum horns for the cyclics and then this for the back. But I'll probably order that you know, an aluminum one and put it in there. But anyways, that's that. The 3 servos are in. I'm super happy with the wiring. I mean, it's pretty stealth. These wire tracks really work well. I mean, if you put the insides of the zip ties on the inside, I mean, look how clean that is. I can't wait to see it when it's all done, because it's like, it already looks like it doesn't have any wires in it. And again, these servos have this plastic coated wire, so like I don't even have to put a covering over them. All of these tracks, you know, these holes were all in there, and it was pretty seamless. So I think that covers everything in the 2 pages. We inserted these 3. Oh no, one more thing. We did the cyclic servos first. We talked about installing the aluminum arms and the balls. So then on the next page, we go to the tail servo and inserted the tail servo and then ran it next to the 2 wires that had already been zipped in. The servo on the right side, I ran over on the other side. So, and that came out, I thought it came out pretty good. What I did was it ducks inside the frame, down below the servo, comes out around. Now, I will probably sand this part of the frame right here. When I get a chance, just push this up a little and sand it down smooth so that this is not resting on an edge like it kind of is right now. And then again, these wire tracks are over here. So this runs up underneath here and into here. The next step on the next page, page 12, is installing the motor. I went ahead and did it. I'm a little confused because when I look in the manual, I think this may be left over or something. It talks about lining up the pinion with the main gear, but the pinion needs to insert into this tray. So I just went ahead and mounted it with it lining up on the tray. But there's no rocket science going on with installing the motor. It's 4 screws. Each screw has a washer. I always go a little extra heavy on the Loctite with motor screws. And the other thing, when you drive those screws in with the motor mounts, because I mean there's so much power going on there, I drive them, I put them in finger tight until they hit the aluminum, and make sure that you put all 4 screws in, and then I give each like a quarter turn, and I go in an alternating pattern as I'm tightening them, just a small turn at a time, torquing them down. So you're distributing the torque evenly with the motor, and just creating the motor sitting on that platform very evenly, and hopefully that helps give it a nice smooth even seat in there. I mean, it seems good. It's kind of hard to tell because it's notchy, because it's that's just how the motors are, but I mean it seems smooth. But that is the next step on page 12 after you get the servos installed, is to install the motor. And there it is, all installed. And you don't really have much of a choice in the way to do it. I mean, the wires either go that way or go this way. I believe I'm going to be putting the speed control on this side, so I put the wires this way. Here's the one wire for that servo. This little front tray thing is pretty convenient. I mean, they've got like little wire slots all around it, so you can run these wires kind of any way you want. It's just kind of like a little firewall over here, but there's a pocket that opens up so the wires can come through. I'm going to have to extend this one probably 2 inches and this one probably 4 inches in order to get it to plug into the FBL, but not a big deal. I definitely like how clean it came out, and was more concerned with that than having to extend these, an inch or 2 is not a big deal. So that's pages 11 and 12. I'm not going to call it the next section of the build because I'm going to keep going. What I call the front transmission is coming up next. There's not really much to that, so we should see the helicopter really start to come together now. And I have to say, this kit, it's continued to impress me through the build. I love the how well the wires hid. Everything has gone together really well. I haven't really encountered any sort of issues. I really like these little inserts that the servos go into, and how they've got the servo wire where it goes through the frame is pretty much pre-grommeted. They kind of lay, I mean, I will say that this is a model, this is something where take a look at this thing before you get going and building it, because everything is laid out for you. You just got to hit the right points. But it's coming out great. I'm super happy with it so far. I'm going to move on to the transmission section, and we'll come back and take a look at it. Okay, so I have installed, again, what I call the front transmission into the helicopter. That's all good to go. The only technique that I use there that might be worth mentioning is take a 2mm wrench and put these self-locking bolts on there. It helps to push them in. So that's a little technique that I use. Now this is probably my least favorite part of the build right here, is building this tail up. And it's also the place where I have had the most difficulty and some issues with getting Loctite on sleeves it doesn't belong on, and then the tail being jammed up. On my 650 build, I forgot to remove these little brass screws and Loctite them, and that caused me to have a little crash with that helicopter. So this tail section is in my opinion the most tricky part of the build, and in my experience the part where I have made the most mistakes and spent the most time. And again, my opinion of just throwing it out there, I don't represent a line. My opinion does not represent that of the company. This is just my personal opinion, and I hope that the video helps people. It's for informative purposes. But that having been said, what I like to do at this point, the way I do this, is take the tail apart going this way, and I just put all the screws in the order I took them out, and in these sections that I took them apart. Now this one is obviously just going to be sitting here, but the next part to go back on will be this one, and then that one, and then that one, and then that one, and that's how the tail goes back together. That's the sequence that I keep it in. This doesn't need anything, but this is going to need work. So what we're going to have to do is I'm going to work my way from this way to this way, just like reading, and I'll start with this unit by taking everything apart, starting with the ball link that's down on the bottom. So take our 1.5, and yeah, I mean, this ball link comes right out easily. So take that out. Oh geez, let me just verify which hole that was in, because it's the inside one, not the outside one. Okay, good. Yeah, I for a split second wasn't paying attention there to which. So we're going to take some Loctite, put it on there. And of course, this being a ball link, we are going to put plenty on there. And per the manual, put it back in the inside hole. And there we go, our first connection. And so let's move down to our next 1.5. Oh no, this is a 2. So I'll go up to a 2mm wrench. And we'll just try to keep this arm straight. And our Loctite on there. These tail fixture pieces, I put just a little like extra. Put that back on there. So there we go, good to go. Next, we're going to move to this screw here. Oh boy. So to go back to our 1.5. Okay, good, it did come out. Now, this is exactly one of those spots that I'm talking about that is particularly tricky because you've got a fixture where you cannot put the screw through and put the Loctite on the other side. So we're going to flip it over here. Yeah, and sure enough, these screws are pretty much loose. And what I'm going to do is take this out, and I am just going to very carefully put some Loctite in the screw fixture. Okay. So now I've got the Loctite in the fixture itself. And then put this back in and drive these screws back in. Good. Moving nice and freely. Spinning it around. And again, I've got the Loctite in the fixture this time, so I'm just going to spin it back around. Perfect. Tight. This is moving totally freely. And you can see Loctite there. I'm actually just going to hit this back side of these screws down in this fixture with a little extra. Probably won't do much because it's just the back side of the screw, but do what we can. All right, so now I've done the ball link, that screw, and that screw. I've got this screw and this screw, and you can see this screw is already halfway loose. So we'll just remove it with our 1.5 millimeter hex wrench. Spin it around. Take the other side out. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing. We are going to take the Loctite and put it in the fixture. Nice and nice. It's beautiful. One more Loctite or thread locker. Put it in the fixture itself on the other side. You don't have to Loctite all the screws, just the ones that you don't want to crash your helicopter. That's my quote of the day. All right, back in, and I'm just going to double check this. Back in and snug. Ooh, almost dropped it to the floor. And let's move over here, back in, and snug. I'd like to thank everybody for all of the happy 40th messages that I got on my wall and PMs, a lot of PMs, so thank you for that. Let's so that very free. Everything is very free here, and I'm actually just going to take a quick step, make sure I got that one, that one, that one, that one. They're all tight. That one and that one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws there. And then lastly, so this is the screw that I missed on my 650X build right here, one of these little screws. And about the 5th hover flight, that guy took off. Now, I'd highly recommend that you have a really small screwdriver. This is a P000, Phillips 000. You really want a small screwdriver, right? And so here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about with collared screws, right? So you got that smooth section there, and then you have the threads. Now, if you just put Loctite on those threads and go running it through this fixture, you're going to get Loctite all over this section that's supposed to slide. It's going to get all over this collar, and after about 10 minutes, this head is going to freeze up, and it's not going to want to move. So take that out, set it down right there in the order it's going to go back in, and this is the side that the threads are going in over here. So I'm going to take my Loctite and put it in the fixture. Beautiful. I'm going to wipe off this excess here. It's not going to help. Get that Loctite all in the fixture. There we go. Beautiful. All right. And then slide this back in. And then take this screw and push it back in. Go screw yourself. And push it through. Oh. There we go. There we go. Perfect. Screw it in, but don't screw it up. There we go. Beautiful. Nice, and that is moving very good. Nice and free movement, but Loctite. I can see the Loctite on the edge of the screw there. So, good to go. Spin it around to the other side. And let's take this off. Take this other one off. Just want to verify when I pull this out, it doesn't have any Loctite on it. Good. So I know I didn't spin it around and take the wrong side out. And I'm going to verify that that doesn't have Loctite on it either. And it doesn't. Good. So perfect. And once again, we're going to take our little micro applicator and put this in here. So these little micro applicators, I like to use these. I think they're actually supposed to be for women's makeup, but I don't know, whatever. You buy them in a package of about 100 in a plastic container, and I like to use a blue one for the blue Loctite and then a yellow one for grease. I'm sorry, a green one for grease, and then I use the yellow one for oil. And just a little color backup for myself when I'm using all three of those things, just so that I don't pick up the wrong one and put it in the wrong place. And the biggest, you know, in a split second, if you pick it up and you do it because you're not paying attention, it's just a pain in the butt. Then you got to clean it off with isopropyl alcohol, or if you don't have any of that, then nail polish remover. You really have to go and clean that surface very thoroughly to put the appropriate thing back on there. So it's much easier to just do it right the first time. Much easier to do it right the first time. All right, and there we go. And then what I'm going to do, just because this is not my favorite part, is I'm just going to verify that everything is set up correctly. And this looks like it should be the other way. It's not set up correctly. because this goes this way and this goes the other way, and it can't swing past. Okay, so there we go. Here's a perfect example. I made a mistake. I gotta pull this thing off because it can't get by. Right? No, it can't get by. Dang. Right, and that arm goes that way. The line goes this way, and then this goes to the boom, and then this is supposed to be this way, right? So this has got to come off. Well, I'll tell you, I always seem to bone up something with this tail section. Oh, good. Just taking one off was enough. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a little loctite on here. Reach through very, very, very carefully. Put a little more loctite on that thread down in there. Beautiful. Put this back in. All right. My dreaded tail section. I always seem to mess this up. So there we go. This piece is complete. What we're going to do is put it back on like so. And then what I'm going to do is, once again, here, we've got these two screws that are going to go in, and these are collared screws. So what we're going to do is put the Loctite on the fixture. That looks good. Get plenty of it on there. Now, because I can't put the Loctite on the screw and put it in there the way I usually do, put it on the threads, I am making sure to get plenty of it in there. Okay, and now move this up to here. Put it back on like so. It's the dreaded tail section. I tell you, I always struggle with this. Every build I struggle with this. This is a 1.5. 2.0. 1.5. Oh no, it is a 2.0. 2.0. Okay, so I'm back. Just had to change a camera battery. So this screw, there we go. Nice and smooth now. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screws, all Loctited, double checked. We'll take our tail blade grips. Now, I know some people would recommend red Loctite here. Fortunately, I don't have any red Loctite, so I'm going to use the blue as the manual calls for, and I will keep an eye on these and make sure that they stay tight. And of course, because of where this screw is going, I am going to try to put a little extra on here and really make sure that these threads are full. This screw and the pinion set screw, call these grub screws. Let's take a look. Tail rotor. Yeah, they just call it a set screw. And actually, we're going to take a step back here because I did not take this apart. So we've got this assembly all good to go thus far. And we're just going to set it right here. And we're going to take this apart now. So first thing I'm going to do is take these tail blade bolts out. This is just like the head, except these are smaller. .5. So we're going to go ahead and take one of these off. And we should have a screw and a spacer. And again, I like to just lay this stuff out in the exact order I want to put it back. A screw, a spacer, the outer race. It says out on it, as it should. And then we're going to take our thrust bearing. Inner race is still, oh no, it came out. Here it is. In goes next. And then we've got our thrust bearing here. And as we usually tend to see with these thrust bearings, quite commonly, as you can see here, that thrust bearing has a speck of grease between these two, and that's it. None of the rest. So we are going to pack that in with grease. The other thing I'm going to do is take a quick look. I'm pretty sure that came out backwards. And to me, like, it's kind of funny because it looks like it's showing it that way in this drawing, but nevertheless, we've got this here. All right, we've got our grease and we've got our grease applicator. And I've even pulled the head off the micro applicator. So it's just a little stem left on there. So I can pack this grease right down in between these bearings. All right, like so. And I'm just going to verify we've got bearing, yes, bearing, washer, but I don't see, is there, yeah, it's in there. That's what I didn't see. It's still in there. Washer, in, thrust bearing, out, washer, socket, collar screw. So we've got bearing, spacer in there. So now we're going to do our in, which it is right there. And we'll just put a little bit of grease on that as well. All right. Cruising along. Just take this and flip it over, make sure it's in there right. Good to go. And then drop this in like so. see it kind of flipped over there, so we'll use this to push it back. Beautiful. All right, and then we've got our out. We're just going to put a little bit of grease on there. Good to go. All right, and then we're going to drop our out down in there. Let's take our back side of our applicator here and flip that over the room. Oh, no, that's wrong. There we go. I've seen people put these together on a wrench, which is a good technique. I have done that before, and I just didn't do it. And there we go. And so last thing we want to put back in is our blue. And again, as with all the tail pieces, I kind of go the extra mile here with this thread locker and make sure to get it down in the threads all the way around, and maybe even just a little bit of extra in there. And grab our 2mm here, and there we go. And that is perfect. Feels nice and smooth. Nice and smooth, everything moves nice. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab another one on the other side and just torque them a little bit. But I'll remove the one on the other side. And we're going to do the same thing, exactly the same on the other side. I'm not going to make you watch it twice. GoPro. All right, so we're back. I've got both sides of the tail blade grips are set up. And now I am setting the tail rotor hub. So that grub screw is extremely important. The first couple of flights, you really, of course, the first couple of flights, you want to look over all the screws. And my technique, what I like to do is take like the smallest wrench I have, which is a 1.5, and I like to just go around and go like that. Almost like I give it the dental check and just make sure that none of these screws have come loose after, and that's why the first flight or two, I'll just hover the helicopter and, just do like some really basic stuff. Like I'll do like what I call an operational check flight, where I'm not going to take it out and test fly it. I'm just going to make sure the FBL is adjusted, put 5 minutes on it, make sure the speed control works, see how the battery burn down is at the 5-minute point. Bring it in, check all my screws, make sure nothing is loose. The last 2 builds that I've done, they were perfectly fine. I didn't have any issues. All of the screws were good after the test flights. So now this is another, this is one of those screws where, and now we've come to using these. These are ones where you can put the collared screw through there, and I will put a little bit of Loctite on the fixture. Pretty much just because it's a tail piece, But you want to make sure not to have any Loctite on the outside because that slider is going to be up against it. Then take that little screw, make sure it's pushed all the way through. Just put a little tiny bit on the end, just to make sure that you get some Loctite in there. So now I've got Loctite on both sides. Okay, and turn it around. And there we go. Perfect. All right, and now I'm just going to check to make sure it's smooth. Yep, nice and smooth. Very easy. Very easy. And now that I've got that attached, and this can run back and forth pretty smooth, I am going to put some grease on this tail shaft here. And come over to the other side. Put some on the other side. There we go. Nice and smooth. Nice and smooth. It's all spread out. So again, I'm going to take the Loctite, put it in the fixture. And there we go. And it is nice and smooth, spinning. Moves nice and easily, and we see everything moving perfectly, and the shaft is looped up there. Nice. Perfect. Good to go. All right, so now that we've got our... All right, so I just want to do a really quick kind of correction to the video here, because the way I got back into this wasn't exactly right. Not that it was wrong. It all worked out. The helicopter hovered fine. The first hover test, nothing came loose in the tail. That's the only thing I've done so far, so everything was good. But when you disassemble this tail, you want to disassemble it starting this way and going this way, as I did in the video. But when you put the tail back together, put the tail box together first. Then assemble all the sliding fixtures. So assemble this tail box piece. It'd be this piece, and this piece. These three pieces you want to put together first, because you won't be able to get to these bolts after these ones have been installed. So what I wound up having to do is just remove these two to get to these two. It's not like it won't work, but save yourself a little bit of time and assemble these three pieces first, and then start assembling your slide pieces. And just remember, like I said, when you assemble these slide pieces, put these two in place and then move this piece and make sure it moves freely. Then put these two in place and make sure this piece slides freely. Then put these two in place and make sure this piece slides freely. And then put these two in place and make sure these little arms move freely. Then put these two in place and make sure these blade grips move freely. So just a little correction there. In the video, I took this piece and started assembling these, and then I just had to take these two back out after. Next time around, it comes apart this way, but put these three pieces back together and assemble it back together going this way. Now, what I would recommend that you do with these screws is like I just did there. Whenever you put two screws in on this tail assembly, slide it. Slide it right then and there, okay? Every single fixture that you attach along the way, make sure that you slide this, okay? Because if any of the screws are set wrong, you want to catch it starting from the arm and working your way out. So when you put these two on, take this fixture and move it, you know, and you want to put a little bit of torque on them. The book recommends in here 5 kilogram centimeters is the torque value that the book recommends. I don't have a torque wrench. I'm doing it by hand. What I do is tighten up 2, move the block, make sure it moves good. Tighten up the next 2, move the arm and the block, make sure it moves good. Tighten up the next 2, move the 3 of them and make sure they move good. And then lastly, tighten these up. And you want to do both of them so that you're not pushing one side, not the other, because then it'd be uneven. So tighten them both up and then moving them. The end product, as you can see, this thing is just moves very easily. So that is definitely good to go. Everything is all lined up. Everything looks good. And now we're just going to put the other side on. Like so. And we get a nice smooth spin. And this moves easily. And now we're just going to put our screws back on the other side. Grab our 2.5 here. So just putting these last 3 tail fixture screws on, and then our tail fixture is good to go. Going to do the same thing with these where I'm not going full tightness. I'm just going down till they hit like that, not putting any pressure on it. And then going and putting the other ones in. And it hit. I'm going to move up to this one, go a quarter, 1/8 of a turn, 1/8 of a turn, 1/8 of a turn, 1/8 of a turn. This one's a little looser. All right, and there it is, all finished. You can see how easily it moves. It's all loctited up. I'm not getting any resistance here. You can see how easily this spins. So this moves nice and easy. That moves nice and easy. That spins nice and freely. It's good to go. We will Loctite these screws when we put it on the tail tube. All right, so I'm putting the tail tube together. I've got the tail fixture all taken care of, all disassembled and put back together and Loctited. So now I'm putting the drive shaft together. And this was something that I hadn't done before, so I want to really Trex is the first time that I had done this process. So on the 550, it uses a 600 torque shaft, and the bearing will slide right off of the torque shaft. On the 650, there's a collar at the end of the torque shaft, and the bearing does not come off. But I just want to walk you through the process. This part is pretty specific and really does need to be done a specific way. And so what we're doing is this bearing slides back and forth. You know, it will slide. It'll come right off the drive shaft. If we come down to the end, it will go over that, and it will come right off the drive shaft. So what we're doing is we are gluing the bearing to the drive shaft. Then we're putting this rubber boot over the bearing. And then we're going to take some oil and just kind of slick it up and take this tube like so and push it into the tail tube. The most important thing here is where we glue this bearing to this drive shaft, you have to be really careful because you only want to get the glue on that inner race of the bearing, okay? If you get that glue on the side channel of that bearing, it's like game over. It's pretty much ruined. You're going to have to order another one. You don't want to be getting glue on that bearing at all. But anyways, that's the process. Step one is to glue the bearing to the drive shaft. And what I'm going to do to prevent from piling up the glue is I'm going to put the glue on a little applicator. Whoa, that was more than I wanted. Okay, like so. And then I'm just going to brush it on here. That way the glue can't pile up because I'm spreading it on here. And I'm just going to spread it this way a little bit, once again to ensure that it doesn't pile up in any way. Okay, so now once I get it on there like so, take this bearing and slide it into the glue. And there we go. And that is nice and tight already. And I'm just going to take this and very carefully just put a little bit on the other side. Being extremely, in fact, I'm even going to go as far as to pull the tip of that off so that it's just this little plastic piece that I'm using. I'll be absolutely 100% sure I'm not getting it anywhere other than in that little, just gonna put a little glue on there. There we go, beautiful. Perfect. And I just want to make sure, yep, nice and smooth. And I've got just the tiniest bit of excess glue right here. I'm just going to wipe it off. Just kind of smooth it out and wipe it off. Perfect. So that bearing is definitely still freely moving. Perfect. And that's what we want. We've got it glued on both sides and the bearing is still very freely moving. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this aside and let this dry for a few minutes before we go any further. But next we're going to put this boot on to the bearing. And then we are going to put a little grease on the boot. Okay, like so. And then we are going to put the, take this, put it on here, and push it up into the tail tube. But first I just want to set it aside and let it completely dry. I don't want to take any chances of getting any kind of glue onto this. So, all right, so back to our tail assembly. I've got everything else from this page in the manual here, page 15. Everything else on page 15 is done. Just pay attention when you put this together. The screws are towards the back of this little fin, so this extra collar kind of goes forward, not back. So there is an orientation, and then there is a top and a bottom. You know, obviously the bottom piece is where these boom supports screw into, so you know, you can just be aware of those orientations, and that this is set up a certain way. You know, you could save yourself some time and rip through that a little faster. This is the control rod support. If I had any complaint in the kit, I kind of wish that this was metal and not plastic. The other thing about this that I've done wrong in the past is, I have glued this metal piece to this support so that the tail rod could slide through it. That's not actually how this is supposed to go. What you want to do is find the center on your tail blades, and then glue this metal shaft in the center, and it does not get tight here. It just slides back and forth like that. But you want to glue it on center, which is right about there, so that it never comes off the metal piece while it's sliding, like that. So I'll glue that in a minute. But we've got our tail boom supports installed. We've got our control rod installed. Nothing going on there. Screwed these around. Of course, A's facing outward. The one thing I'd like to highlight on the tail, if there's any one piece in here that I wasn't, you want to take a very close look at, is these two plastic pieces right on the end that come off the main blade grips. I felt the rest of the tail assembly goes together really good. Zero resistance through the whole thing. These, you walk a really fine line between putting some torque on these screws and then tightening up the tail. This side does not have a sleeve in it, although this is a collared screw, so it is smooth in there. But if you torque that down a little bit, you can put some pressure on there. But this side, the main blade grip side, to me, is the side I like even less. As you tighten that screw down, you get to that collar that's in there, that brass collar. And if you put any tension on it, then you put tension on the tail. And that brass collar doesn't really slide inside the fixture. It's like that brass collar is designed so that a collared screw or the screw that's inside of it can move through the fixture, but it's not going to be moving because you're putting torque on it when you tighten it down. So this little piece right here was the only piece I really thought was tricky at all. The rest of it was really pretty straightforward. You just take it apart, Loctite it, put it back together. But when you're doing the build and you put this thing back together, do 2 screws and then make sure this moves freely. Do these 2 screws and make sure this piece moves freely. Then do these 2 screws and make sure this piece moves freely. Okay, and then when you get to these, just spend a little extra time and just make sure that you've got a little bit of torque on them, but yet they still move freely, like so. So this is all set up and ready. But what I have here, now I've got my drive shaft with my bearing glued in place, and we are just going to take our, it's almost like a grommet, and install it over our bearing, like so. Okay, so now you got your grommet on your bearing like that, and we're just going to take a little bit of oil and just kind of slick this up a little bit, like so. Of course, like I've done here, you want to have your tail tube assembly, everything done as far as possible. And so we'll take a little bit of oil and spread it on there like that. I really like this little oil bottle with the needle. This is really good for adding a little drop of oil to the bearings too. So after we do that, we want to take, now of course that is in the middle. So we're going to take this drive shaft and insert it into the torque tube. And I'm just going to get it started. Trying not to get oil on my fingers. Just going to get it started a little bit like that. Okay, now we're going to take this clear tube and we're going to put it up here against this rubber fixture, and there we go. We're just pushing it in like so, sliding it into the torque tube. And there we go. We can feel when the drive shaft gets to the tail, and it's probably not in the, right in the drive. There we go. I can feel it going in now. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, so just make sure that you push it in. You're going to get to your tail assembly like here, but it may not be down into the drive gears yet. Okay, so now you can see how far this is sticking out, about 1.5 inches. Okay, and our rubber grommet is about here. Rubber grommet's about here. It's glued onto the torque shaft, so it's got to be in the middle of the torque shaft. Yeah, we pushed it with this, so it's right about here where this is on the inside, and you can see that this is very freely turning. I mean, it'll almost keep spinning when you let go of it with the momentum, and that's without the tail blades. So this is what you want to see when you turn this. You want to be able to spin it, and it keeps spinning freely like that. This is all set up and ready to go, and now I will just take this helicopter, and again, we're going to push it in. But of course, when we get to the front transmission, we got to make sure that we are in the drive gear correctly in order for it to really to fully slide all the way in. And what you want to do is on this side, this is how you know that you're in the correct amount. You got this hole right here, and that should line up with that screw right there. And that's when you know you're all the way up in the front. Okay, and then in the back, when you put the tail on, there is a hole right there in the tail shaft where this piece, when your tail boom support tail fin goes on, it locks in there. So that's how you know that your tail shaft is the perfect, the tail is locked into a specific spot, and then the front meets up with this hole right here. You know that your tail is perfectly lined up in the front and the back with the gears and everything else. So after you get the tail section installed, what you're going to do next is put the main drive shaft down into the helicopter, and the kit comes with 2 spacers. And so originally when I had the helicopter mocked up, I didn't have the spacers installed, and what you were getting is like a very slight clicking of the drive shaft because there was a very slight space down in there. And what you want to do is put the 2 spacers on, like so, onto the drive shaft. Now this is a 0.3 millimeter spacer and a 0.5 millimeter spacer, and just install them like that, and put the main drive shaft down into the helicopter. And the way I like to do it is just, if you take 2 6S batteries and set it down behind the helicopter, it kind of supports it down from behind, and then put the blade grip that you're not using in there, just so that's what the helicopter is resting on, and you can see the main shaft coming down through. Now, the hole in the main shaft lines up with the main blade grips, right? So you see, if the main blade grips are straight up and down, if the main blade grips are straight up and down, the hole is right there. So like to put the helicopter on its side, okay, I've got both spacers in, and now I'll bring the main gear up and put the main shaft down through. And then we're going to take our main shaft bolt and put it through the gears and the main shaft, and we'll check the spacers. If everything is tight and it's still free spinning, then I'll leave both spacers in. If I get the main shaft down and in place and I can't get this screw down into there's not enough space, or when I get the screw in, everything is too tight, then I'll take the main shaft back out and I'll take one of these spacers off. So again, I've got the helicopter on its side. I've got it supported by 2 batteries, and I'm going to slide the main shaft back up. And there it is. All right, and there's our main shaft sliding down. Now we're going to have to lift the helicopter just a little bit. And there it is, all the way down in place. It looks to me like one of those spacers is going to have to come out. So we look down in there. The main drive shaft is just a little bit too high. So I'm going to remove one of those spacers. Now I've got the thicker spacer back on there. Beautiful. That went back in perfectly. So now that the screw is all the way through, I'm going to tip it up, and I'm just going to check. Yep, and everything is free moving. And then I'm going to take the head block, grab it, and pull it up and down. And what I don't feel is a clicking. Everything feels nice. There is the I wouldn't even call it slop. I would say it's perfect. And now sometimes it takes a little bit of playing. In the meantime, while we push that screw through, the bolt came off the other side. So I'm going to take my pliers and grab the bolt like this. And this is kind of another one of those parts of the build that takes a little bit of playing around to get the screw through and get the bolt on the other side. But we've got the right spacer on there, and we've got the bolt pushed through. You can see it. It's spun around now, and it's on the other side. So what I'm going to do is see if I can get it down into there. There we go. Beautiful. And then I'm going to hold it in with my finger and come over to the other side and get the threads lined up. There we go. Perfect. Now that I got the threads lined up, I just got to get the bolt sunk into the fixture a little bit, which it is now, and I can feel it grabbing. Perfect. Oh, and there we go. It just snugged up. Perfect. While I have it upside down, I'm going to check my pinion alignment with my slant gear, and I like exactly what I see, which is there's about room for, there's the slightest gap between the pinion and the slant gear. You could barely fit a piece of paper in there, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. That's exactly what I want. So that looks perfect. The gear is nice and tight. I've got my wires run through these channels in the frame, and I don't see, I mean, they're definitely a good distance from the main gear. Everything is out of the way, and it looks good. Well, unfortunately, after I got everything all together and I got the bolt tightened up on the bottom, I just felt like there was a little resistance in the drivetrain with the 5mm spacer that was in there. So originally I had the 5mm and the 3mm in there. Then I took the 3mm out, and I had just the 5mm in there. I got the bolts on, I got everything all lined up and ready to go. And I just didn't like, I felt like there was some resistance on the drivetrain. There was a little bit of tension there that I didn't like. It just didn't feel like it was as free as it was before. So I took the 5mm spacer out and I put the 3mm spacer in, and I like it a lot better now. I think it's a lot better. I'm not getting like a spacer click when I pull the head up and down. And the drivetrain is definitely freer than it was before. I think that's perfect. I think the 3mm spacer is perfect for the setup. So that's what you're going to need to do with the main drive shaft. To me, kind of another one of those a little bit tricky parts of the build is it comes with these two spacers, and then you just have to kind of figure out which one is right. And stabbing the bolt through the bottom can be a little bit tricky, and getting everything lined up with the tail drive gear and the one-way bearing and the drive shaft. And like I said, just keep in mind, pay attention to where the hole is in the drive shaft in relation to your main blade grips. That will kind of help you get everything lined up. But I've got the main drive shaft installed now. I'm happy with it. Everything is smooth. I'm not getting any resistance on the tail. I think in an auto it's gonna flow nice and smooth. I've got the spacing is lined up perfectly on. There is just a very, very slight space in the slant gear versus the pinion, which is exactly what I'm looking for. Pay close attention to all this when you put the main shaft down in. The spacer on the pinion and the spacer on the top of the main drive shaft. You know, if you're going to use one, if you're going to use in the 3 and the 5, and which is which. That part takes a little playing around to get everything right, but I think I got it nailed. Everything is nice and smooth. I've got the space I want there. I've got the space I want here. Everything feels good. So the tail section is done. I just got to get these screwed on, and that pretty much completes the build. The helicopter is pretty much built at this point. I've got my wires run on the inside. So there's no wires on the outside of the frame at all. Everything is kind of hid. You can see those wires that are on the inside are nowhere near the drive gears. I've only got a couple of screws left to go just to put like the main tail supports on here, or the tail boom supports. But the build is complete. This is 2 sessions it took me. You know, I would say that, you know, 2, 3, or 4 hour sessions is what it took me to build the helicopter. And now I'll be moving into phase 3 of it, which is installing the flight controller and the speed control and actually getting it ready to fly. All right, so the build is complete. When I say the build is complete, the physical build of the helicopter is complete. I have not programmed it yet. I have not installed the speed control yet, so I still have that to go. But the physical build of the helicopter is done. I'm super happy with it. I got a couple little touches. I like to go back and kind of black out those letters and stuff, but I'll finish that off here in a couple of minutes. The physical build is done. I'm super. These are some of the tools I used. So I have my caliper here. This adjustable wrench is nice when you're adjusting these linkage rods. You just put it in the middle, you know, and then use this piece on the end to tighten or loosen those, you know, and then just check them that they match. 29 millimeters inside diameter to inside diameter with this marker to just kind of mark things up for measurements. I've got a hex key set here. This is a 3, 2.5, 2. This was good for just about everything except the main blade grips. Those 2 bolts there are 4s, I believe. And it was nice to have 2 of them. It is also kind of nice to have the socket-headed pieces, because you can kind of get it at an angle. You need them once in a while during the build, so that's nice to have. Scissors, cut the bags open. I use these little cutters on zip ties. Of course, we got a whole bunch of zip ties that we went through. This is the tube that you use that comes in the kit to push the bearing fixture up inside the tail tube. I haven't used this yet, but I will be soon. So that goes right over there. It's really nice to have this screwdriver. So I've got a screwdriver in my little toolkit here, a standard number 0 Phillips in my standard toolkit. But it's nice to have the even smaller one. This is a Phillips 000. And this is the screwdriver that I use when I'm working with those little intricate tail pieces. And I would highly recommend this. This is nice to have. The smaller screwdriver works really well. It does have a light on it too, which is kind of nice. So you want to have yourself a real fine screwdriver like that. Now I haven't installed like I said, the physical build is done. Here's my extra battery trays. I used these 6-cell batteries here just to lean the helicopter on its side so I could install the main gear. I've got the flight controller that I'm going to use. I'm not going with the Micro Beast Plus. I've got these. These are really nice too. These are EC5s made by Progressive RC. You can see this side here is split, right? And so these are very easy to connect and unconnect, okay? So if you're going to go with EC5 connectors, which, you know, I like EC5s, these are really nice. These Progressive RC ones, oh man, these are a lot easier to use. I won't put anything else on an ESC other than the Progressive RC version of the EC5. But we've got our ESC here. I've got my swash leveling tool here, swash plate leveler. I've got my programmer for my ESC. So I will be setting up a throttle governor on the helicopter. Obviously, we used a lot of Loctite. This is the grease that I used, which I just use on all my models. Just I don't know. I don't think there's anything. It's just a grease. This was the Zap-A-Gap I used to set the tail slider and glue the bearing onto the drive shaft. I like to have this bottle here with a pin on it, and this is actually mercury lower unit fluid that I have in here, and I like to use that because it's particularly water resistant, because it's designed to be used in a water environment. So I like to use that on my bearings, and I'll just give each of the bearings just a little shot of that, you know, before I run the helicopter. I'll also put a dry lubricant on the slant gear and the tail drive gear, just a little bit, just to keep it a little quieter and make it run a little better. This was the first build I did where I ran the wires on the inside, and I'm really happy with it. You can see here's the zip ties on the outside here, and the wires are all on the inside of the helicopter. I don't know how well you can see them, but they're all on the inside. The only issue that I would see with this is, you know, if you have to replace a servo, it's definitely going to take longer to get in there and get one of these servos out of there. But when I set the head, it comes with 2 spacers, a 0.3 and a 0.5, and I thought when I put them both in, it was too tight. And when I took out the 0.3, I still found with the 0.5, there was a little resistance in the drivetrain. And I went back to the 0.3, and I think that's perfect. There's no real up and down gap on the drivetrain, and there's no resistance in the drivetrain either. So everything is going really smooth. I probably shouldn't have put the mains on because I will run the motor up. I'll take these mains back off again when I run the motor up. And I don't know, either be careful with the tail or I'll pull those off too. I think I've got a very slight adjustment to make on the tail slider, but man, I'll tell you, is it smooth. I went back and I played a little bit with the very last piece of this tail. I'll just pull it out right here. See if I can pull up the nomenclature on this piece. This piece right here. Collar screw. Yes, it's a control link. Okay, so I went back and I played with the control link. Okay, and if there's any part of this build that this was a little tricky, this very one little piece here, and I'm surprised. Everything's metal, everything's, you know, really good, but this one little control link is plastic. And particularly this screw that goes into the main grip, if you just tighten it just a little bit too much, it puts a lot of pressure on that brass slide in there, and it will really tighten up your tail section. So pay particular attention to that piece right there and these two screws and how you put them in. I'm probably going to wind up putting red Loctite on these, or possibly even anaerobic retainer, because when you tighten them up the way I'd like to put a little more torque on them, it just tightens the whole tail up. And if you loosen them up just a little tiny bit, everything is just perfectly flowing. So I'm probably going to wind up putting red thread locker on those. But other than that, we had that. We glued this in place. Stabbing the main, you know, the bottom screw that goes through, that can be a little tricky there. I put the helicopter on its side. I rested on those two 6S batteries. Just be careful. I mean, obviously you got your canopy mounts and you got your other pieces over there. You just want to be careful with it. Another thing I kind of wish they did was tell you what the extras are. I hate getting done with a kit and having extras and kind of wanting. So this 55HZ10, it looks like they give you a couple extra ball links, and they give you a couple extra link grips, and looks like that's one for the tail, some zip ties, and a couple extra spacers. So there is a couple extra parts in the kit, and that's about it. The physical build is done. So don't forget to check out the channel, RC Flights, and see these helicopters flying with cameras on them, and get telemetry data and see how fast they fly, and all that information. I will be doing a telemetry flight with this helicopter at some point. We'll see what kind of speed it's putting down, you know, in a flyby. And I'm not like a team pilot type of flyer, but we'll get it out there and get it inverted and all those things. So stick around. I will do a quick program video through what I'm doing for the program. I'm not going to do a full how to program an icon video. There's already plenty of those out there, and plenty of these. But I will just do a quick little video 3 with the final touches I put on the helicopter, and we'll do a final look over, and then we'll get out and do the maiden flight. It's not. We got to start over. this up. GoPro, stop recording.